Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Petra Mortimer with Generations Health Education. Thank you so much for joining us for our program. Now's the time to get beyond burnout. What to do when you're barely hanging on as a caregiver. Presented by Jennifer FitzPatrick. We are so grateful to have Covenant Living Communities and Services sponsoring today's program. Before we start, there are a few things I want to go over with you. Everyone is muted to eliminate any background noise. However, this is an interactive program, so please feel free to ask any questions, answer questions, or comment on the discussion that is taking place. To do this, you can utilize the chat feature, or you will have the ability to unmute yourself. If you do so, please make sure you mute yourself after. As a reminder, to find the chat, you can scroll over the bottom of your screen, and there you will see a banner that pops up. On the banner, there's a bubble that says chat. When you click on that, the chat feature will launch and will most likely show up on the right-hand side of your screen. When you use chat, your questions, comments, or answers will only be seen by our sponsors, our presenter, and myself. This is simply for privacy reasons. Again, we encourage your participation, so please use the chat feature. Jennifer's great about keeping an eye on the chat to answer your questions. We also have several polls today. They're anonymous, but we do encourage you to click on those once they pop up. Okay, let's get started by showing you this short video about Covenant Living.
Hello, I'm Jay Hibbard, Senior Vice President at Covenant Living Communities and Services, and we're pleased to be able to spot. Hello, I'm Jay Hibbard, Senior Vice President at Covenant Living Communities and Services, and we're pleased to be able to sponsor this event for you. Did you know that more than 40 million adult children provide some form of care for their aging parents? Well, today's speaker, Jennifer FitzPatrick, a former psychotherapist and gerontologist, will talk to us about how the right environments and meaningful connections have the power to change lives. With Covenant Living being one of the nation's largest not-for-profit senior living providers, our mission drives us every day to provide communities that provide a place for aging parents and loved ones to grow and engage in ways that promote purpose and joy. Today's presentation is something that many of you can relate to. You're caring for your own families while also providing a helping hand and care for your aging parents or loved ones. You know, a move to a senior living community can alleviate this stress, provide newfound freedoms, and restore healthy relationships. We would love to have you visit one of our communities and experience firsthand how you can find peace of mind for yourself and your loved ones with compassionate care from Covenant Living, a name you can trust. Now, on behalf of all of us at Covenant Living, please welcome Jennifer FitzPatrick for today's presentation.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you so much to Covenant for hosting today's event. We're so happy to have you here. I want to reiterate that everybody is welcome to write into the chat section at any point, any comments, any questions. And I know many of you already have. Some people have written in that they're taking care of a parent that they don't like. I wonder how many of you can relate to that. Some of you have written in that your loved someone has certain behaviors now that they're getting older, or they have memory impairment. I'm guessing a lot of you can probably relate to that. Some of you are just saying, I just want my loved one, my mom, to be safe, and I want her to be happy. So feel free. This is a working session, so I want to encourage everybody to grab a pencil and paper or open up a Word document on their computer to take some notes and to write yourself a little bit of notes about what we are going to discuss today to help you get through any burnout that you might be experiencing, and also so you can reduce the stress that you're dealing with. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up our PowerPoint again. And I want to again, remind you, if you would, feel free to get a piece of paper and a pencil, or open up a Word document on your computer so you can take some notes, so you can be thinking about what you want to do, what you want to feel like at the end of this program. So the first question I want you to ponder and think about, and you don't have to share your answer, but I would love for you to share if you feel comfortable, is I want you to share, before March 2020, before the world was hit with this pandemic, where were you? Would you say your stress level was at a 0? And maybe some of you were caregiving at that point, or maybe you weren't. Maybe you weren't caregiving at that point. But before the pandemic hit, which was tremendously stressful for all of us, where was your stress level? Now, I'm guessing most of you are not going to say 0, because you're probably on some pretty powerful medications if you're actually at a 0, or you're dead. But some of you might say, I would say I was at a 50, I was at a 70. So I want you to write that down. I want you to write down either on your piece of paper with your pen or on your Word document. I want you to write down, where was your stress level prior to March 2020? And I'm going to leave that open for a moment. And I want to see if we get a few people that might want to share where they would put their number. And this is just a self-assessment. Where was your stress level? And I'll actually go first. I would say that my stress level, I'm not currently caregiving, but I would say my stress level was maybe in the middle, maybe at a 50. So you don't have to share in the chat section if you don't want to, but if you do want to, we'd love to hear some feedback. Okay, so before March 2020, I'm hearing from Carmen at 40, Martha saying about a 70, pretty high. Anybody else want 70, Julie? So again, I shared 50, just the normal stressors, work, travel, everything that just goes along with life before the pandemic hit. Okay, so we got lots of people writing in, and a lot of people, it seems like they're on the higher side. So 75 before March 2020. Okay, very interesting stuff. So when March 2020 hit, the world dealt with some crazy stuff that we never had to think about before. I don't know about you, but I never heard the term social distancing in my entire life. Never heard it. And I just said, social distancing, what is this? But it was a very scary feeling, a very scary time. The world seemed like it turned upside down. And so if you were a caregiver, maybe you have a parent or an aunt or a grandparent, maybe it's even a spouse that you're taking care of, and you had this situation where you were already at a 70 or a 75 or higher, I bet your stress level skyrocketed because you were dealing with so much uncertainty. Now, back then, I don't know if everybody remembers, but we were all told, it's going to be 2 weeks to keep people out of the hospital, make sure the hospitals aren't overwhelmed. I remember thinking that was such a scary thing when it went beyond the 2 weeks. When somebody knows, when we know how long something's going to last, usually we do better with it. Okay, well, I know that, it's almost like if you're trying to maybe get through a difficult period at work, or you want to get your child to their graduation and it's really stressful. Maybe they're having trouble with some of their classes, and you know that this is the date when it's going to be over. It becomes less stressful because you have a measure of certainty. And as a former psychotherapist, I know that not having certainty has always created a lot of anxiety for folks. And then we went on to, you gotta wash down your groceries. You better, even if you're at your house, you gotta wash your hands. Masks work. No, they don't. Yes, they do. No, they don't. Wait, only certain kinds of masks. And we were faced with all of these different pieces of information, and we didn't know, how do we protect ourselves? How do we protect our loved ones? So I'm guessing for many of you, and we had somebody write in that they were at about a 40 when the pandemic hit. I'm guessing your stress level probably went up a lot. So the idea that we're here to talk about today is, are you dealing with some burnout? And maybe you were dealing with burnout before the pandemic, or maybe it's something new that happened since the pandemic. But I believe that caregiver burnout right now is at an all-time high. What do I mean by that? Well, according to the Cleveland Clinic, it's a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion where we feel like we just can't take another stressful event. Now, if you are experiencing this feeling, it's not just caregiving that's stressing you out. There's probably other things in your life. Maybe you have your own health issues or your own mental health issues, or maybe there's financial stuff that you're thinking about. There could be a lot of reasons that contribute, because being a caregiver is perhaps not the only stressful event in your life. Maybe there's things going on with your kids. Anybody is at risk for burnout, especially after the pandemic. People that work in hospitals, people that work as psychotherapists, for example, definitely because of all the work that they've had to do and the staffing issues, they're definitely at risk for burnout. But especially you, if you're trying to take responsibility for a mom, a dad, a grandparent, whoever that is, you're going to be particularly at risk for burnout. Now, a cousin of burnout, I like to call compassion fatigue. And I'm wondering if anybody's ever heard that term before. But compassion fatigue is actually when we start to become numb to what's going on with somebody that's sick or somebody that's been through a trauma. We actually start to distance ourselves, maybe mentally or even physically, and we have an additional exhaustion. Another example of compassion fatigue just is apathy. And this sometimes occurs. Remember when whatever news program you watch, there's so many different ones, but when we're glued to CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, and we're hearing all the bad things that are happening because of the pandemic or inflation or any of the other issues that might be on our mind, plus we're caregiving, it can be even more exhausting, and we get to the point where we just can be indifferent. And so what I would like to invite everybody to do right now is to complete the survey that Petra has put up. And I want you to share, just click on what the right answer for you is. In the last 3 months, would you say that you relate to feeling burnout? Would you say you relate to feeling some compassion fatigue? Would you say that you relate to feeling both? In the last 3 months. And if you are somebody that says, you know what, I'm actually doing okay, I'm guessing we're probably not got those folks on here. And the reason I'm expecting that we don't is because the reason I'm expecting that we don't have a lot of those folks on here today is only simply because I'm thinking that if you did feel like you didn't have burnout or compassion fatigue, you probably wouldn't join us for this program. But if you are somebody that says, you know what, I don't have either, just write that in the chat section. But as for everybody else, please feel free to click on burnout, compassion fatigue, or both. And we'll give Petra a little bit of time to add us up, tally us up. And again, feel free to write on, not just in the chat section, any comments, any questions, anything that you want us to address. This hour is all about you and getting answers so you can feel better and be less stressed as you move forward in your caregiving journey. Okay, so wow, 61% of you are saying that you feel both compassion fatigue and burnout. About 13% of you say only burnout. And then we've got 26% of you saying only compassion fatigue. And if there's anybody out there that, I'm guessing there's probably not a lot of people, but if there's anybody out there that is saying, I'm fine, feel free to write that in the chat section too. So the goal of this program, again, is we're going to get you away from the burnout, get you away from that compassion fatigue, and get you to feeling better so you can be a good caregiver while getting some of your life back and getting your mental health back, getting your mental health where you want it to be. I also want to take a moment to remind everybody that even if people who weren't caregiving, they are experiencing burnout and compassion fatigue. So you are doing maybe double, triple, quadruple duty. Maybe you're raising kids. Maybe you have several people in your family that you're caregiving for. Maybe you have a job. Maybe you might be dealing with all sorts of issues. So just simply being a caregiver before all the pandemic stuff happened definitely is something that can cause burnout and compassion fatigue. Okay, so we have one participant saying, my 94-year-old mom has been telling me she won't be around much longer. She's going downhill rapidly, and that she prays not to wake up. She sleeps all day, won't eat, stop taking meds. The next day she'll get up, have coffee, curl her hair, and tell me she wants to travel. So for that participant that just wrote in, and I'm curious, I don't want to say your name because you only wrote to the host and panelists. If I'm allowed to say your name, please let me know. But is there a dementia diagnosis or a cognitive impairment to that individual that just wrote in? If you would, that would help us respond to you a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pull our PowerPoint back up. Okay, so caregiving in and of itself is a recipe for burnout and compassion fatigue if we are not taking care of ourselves. Okay, I think that that's pretty obvious. Your life completely changed because of the pandemic. Now, I know some of you might be saying, well, I'm actually in a state where not that much changed, because it's really wildly different. California was different from Florida. Florida was different from Vermont. Vermont was different from Texas, right? So we have all these different, but everybody's life changed in some way. Even just telehealth, for example. Maybe telehealth was good or bad for your loved one. It might have been a positive thing for you and your family or a negative thing. Or maybe even if you're in a state where not a whole lot changed, that the physician for your loved one wouldn't take in-person appointments or maybe miss screenings. So a lot changed about your life, or maybe the schooling situation changed. So if you add, you're a caregiver plus your life changed because of the pandemic. Okay, so from the person that I just want to jump back into response to the person. Again, if I'm allowed to say your name, say yes or no, or tell me if there's a pseudonym you want me to use. We've got somebody writing in, seniors have a hard time with telehealth and they need help with that. A lot of times, especially the generation older than baby boomers, typically have more trouble with technology. Not all, but some do. So Robin, what I want to say to you about your mom, Robin gave me permission to use her name. She says her mom is a bit narcissistic and controlling. Actually, I do whole sessions just about working with, if you're a caregiver and you're working with a loved one, a mom, a dad, whoever with personality disorder traits, but your mom has her wits about her, she's able to, no cognitive impairment, which is great. What I would say, Robin, is we're going to get to some solutions toward the end. I think you said she lives with you. Please forgive me. There's a lot going on in the chat section. Is your mom living with you? It kind of seems like she is, and I'm curious about that. So I'd like to give you a little bit of feedback, but when we get to how do we turn this around? How do we turn around burnout and compassion fatigue? You're going to have some ideas of how you might be able to cope with that narcissistic behavior. And I tell you, you're not the only one. There are people who have written in this morning, everybody's morning time. There are people who have written in today who have said, I don't like my parent. That it's really validating to be on a program like this and know that there are other people who say, my mom's a narcissist. My dad has borderline traits, or my mom's always been really dependent, or we don't always get along. That is normal. These perfect families that are sometimes depicted on television are not real. Okay, so the recipe for compassion fatigue also includes when you add to the caregiving plus your life changed because of the pandemic, plus you had difficult feelings because of the pandemic, right? And because of being a caregiver. So maybe you really resent it that you had to do telehealth with your parent, or maybe you really were really scared and anxious when you had to take your loved one to the doctor because you were so worried? Maybe you're immunocompromised and you were worried about getting COVID, or maybe and I'm just saying, all this goes all over the place. Some people love the mask thing, some people hate it, some people think social distancing was a miracle and wonderful, some people thought it was unnecessary. But I'm guessing that you had some kind of difficult feelings during the course of the pandemic, whether it was sadness, loneliness, whether it was fear, very bad feelings of anxiety and fear, whether it was anger, whether it was resentment. Maybe it had to do with conflicting with other people. We've got another person writing in, I don't want my loved one to pass on, but I can't do this anymore. Okay. Thank you all for sharing these difficult feelings. So plus, again, adding to the recipe for burnout and compassion fatigue, conflict, because the difficult feelings that we all have experienced, you probably have had conflict with somebody in your life. You probably have had conflict with somebody in your life. So for some of you, it might be that sister that lives in Iowa and you live in California, and that sister has done nothing to help you with mom. Can anybody relate to that? So you've had conflict, or you said, you know what? I'm going to let mom do what she wants to do right now because she's 95. And if she gets COVID, she gets COVID. And your sister's saying, you're irresponsible, you're awful. You can't let her do anything, but yet the sister doesn't want to participate in care. That happens in a lot of families. Or maybe you have had arguments with your spouse, like your spouse is like, I don't really want your parent living here anymore. Or maybe, especially with all of the volatile stuff that's gone on social media in the last couple of years because of the pandemic, there's just been more and more and more and more conflict. Robin shared with us that mom has lived with her for 6 years, and initially it was supposed to be 1 to 2. Robin, I'm really curious. It was supposed to be 1 to 2 years. What happened? What happened? Why is it more than 2 years? So I believe we have a poll coming up, right, Petra? All right. So I want to assess, and I want you, again, to write this down for yourself. Have you had significant conflict with someone you love in the last year? Whether it's a sibling, whether it's actually the person you're caring for, whether it's friends. So have you had a significant conflict with someone you love in the last year? Maybe there's been an estrangement. Maybe there's just been a lot of arguing. Maybe there's certain topics you can't talk about. I feel like the political arena has gotten really into a lot of families, unfortunately, a topic that is very, very, very stressful for a lot of people. But just conflict over, gosh, I don't like the way you're doing things for your loved one, and you should do it differently, but I'm not gonna be able to help you. So have you had any kind of significant conflict with somebody that you love in the last year? And Robin, if you are willing, feel free to write it in the chat section. Why is she there still if it was only supposed to be 1 to 2 years? And when Petra feels like she has enough responses, she'll go ahead and tally us up. Have you had significant conflict with someone you love in the last year? Wow, 83% of you said yes. And the 17% of you who said no, I'm so happy for you. For this, in all seriousness, for the 17% of you who have said no significant conflict with somebody you love in the last year, I really would welcome you writing in to the chat section, sharing why you think that is, because most of your peers on this program today are saying yes. 83% have said yes. And I will tell you, I'll share just personally, I've had some significant conflict in the last year with some people that I love for a variety of reasons. And I think some of it And again, I want to share, I'm not caregiving at the moment. I have been a caregiver many times in my life, but thankfully I'm not caregiving at this moment. But I think a lot of that has to do with life changing because of the pandemic and having difficult feelings. And then that creates conflict. And sometimes people are not able to work out their differences because they're under so much stress. Maybe they're burned out. Maybe they have compassion fatigue. Maybe they're caregiving or not. Stacy says, I don't let the internal conflict out to keep the peace. So I'm guessing that Stacy might be struggling internally. Okay. And I wonder if you want to write in, Stacy, if I'm right on that, because when we don't, conflict in and of itself isn't bad. It's just if we're not dealing with it in a healthy way, having conversations. We've got people writing in, it depends on the definition of significant. One person's writing in, I took conflict as burning resentment or permanent damage to the relationship. For that person that just wrote in, I think I would say that it's simply a big argument, or maybe having to really agree to disagree, really having a big difference of opinion. That's really, it doesn't necessarily have to mean a permanent damage to the relationship. Yeah. Okay. So we've got another person that says, yep, I would join that with that definition. Somebody else said my work responsibilities continued while my spouse worked from home. A lot of people found that very stressful. Oh, you're working from home. I'm still commuting. I'm still going into the same place that I've always been in. I'm guessing the person that wrote that in is an essential worker. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, in my book, Cruising Through Caregiving, there is, and if you go to cruisingthroughcaregiving.com, you can get all the worksheets completely for free, plus a free chapter. But what we have in front of you, we're going to do 4 slides, and I'm actually going to stop sharing my camera for the moment because I want you to just focus on what you have in front of you. What I want everybody to do is write down every word or term you are feeling right now. All right. And this is an exercise in Cruising Through Caregiving that's called the Caregiver Feelings Worksheet. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to take a look. And if we happen to have anybody joining by phone, I don't think we do, but I'm going to read the words. I'm going to just go through them. And I want you to write every single word you are feeling right now. And if you want to say up within the last week, words or terms you're feeling: distressed, emotional, bitter, enraged, burned out, delighted, glum, deserving, competent, appreciative, special, hopeful, proud, sad, safe, under pressure, important, hopeless, worthy, wise, moral, inept, controlled, positive. So we're going to go to the next slide. If everybody wants to just write down you can write down as many as you want. What word or term do you feel right now, or maybe in the last week or so? Okay, the next group being effective, rewarded, composed, blessed, lost, joyful, heartbroken, adrift, appreciated, mad, refreshed, thankful, disoriented, in control, confused, worried, furious, satisfied, upset, honored, dejected, loved, valued, grateful, guilty, disappointed, disgruntled, nervous. Okay, the third one: unappreciated, successful, low, happy, stressed, fulfilled, deserted, respected, manipulated, confident, displeased, mistreated, short-tempered, calm, comforted, helpful, frazzled, accepting, edgy, sleep-deprived, reassured, harassed, prepared, determined. And we're going to do the last piece of this exercise. the caregiver feelings exercise from Cruising Through Caregiving. And Petra, if you would put that in the chat section where people can download this exercise if they like. Angry, cheerful, loving, alone, tired, disgusted, lonely, comfortable, genuine, irritated, resentful, annoyed, abandoned, motivated, resilient, peaceful, worn out, useless, betrayed, glad, pleased, relieved, useful, tearful. Oops. So what I would like to invite everybody to do now is I want you to take a look at the list, okay, of what you wrote down. What did you write down? What words? And what I want you to do is I want you to add up how many words that you believe in your definition are positive words. And then how many words would you say are negative words? So I want to give everybody a moment to tally up on their piece of paper and pen, or if they did it on a Word document. And I want you to feel free to share how many positive words and how many negative words in the chat section. In the meantime, I had somebody write in. Back to Robin. Okay, Robin. So Robin's mom, if you recall, I'm going to please feel free to write into the chat section with your positive number and your negative number. How many positive, how many negative words? Robin saying the reason that her mom did not leave after 1 to 2 years and stayed for 6 years is because mom had a UTI, couldn't go home to her farm in PA. So the older sister put her in a nursing home. She had a major stroke 2 years after arrival. Older brother flew in from California. Siblings advised her to keep her in the home in PA, so zero support because you took her against advice. You sold her farm. The older brother sold the farm. Okay, so you felt like you had to bring her to you. So they gave you no support because you took her out of the community against advice. Okay. Brian's saying 16 positive and 2 negative. Brian, what are you doing on this program? That is a really, really impressive score. Anybody not doing so many positives and less negatives? Brian, I'm going to guess that you're a senior advisor. Okay, you're a professional. You're a professional that works in this field. You're not somebody who is actually caregiving for a loved one at this moment. Okay, who else would like to share? Anybody want to share? And it is private. If you don't feel comfortable sharing, that's okay. I really do want everybody to mostly negative. Okay. So this is all negative words for me. We got somebody else writing in. Okay. Positive 0, negative 54. Okay. Half 15 positive, 6 negative, or 15. Yes, 15. Okay, great. Okay, so here's the thing. For those of you who are saying mostly negative, if you've got more negative than positive, and especially if you're somebody that identified earlier as burned out or experiencing compassion fatigue, you have to do something to change your situation. You have to do something. You're the only one that can. 15 negative and 6 positive. Okay. Half of the words on those lists were what most people would consider positive words. Half of those words on that list were what most people would consider negative words. If your positive words are very, very low or non-existent, again, and especially if you self-identified as someone that's experiencing compassion fatigue or burnout, you got to do something to change. The status quo is not working. Let me give you an example. Ever go through a period where you want to lose some weight and you're thinking to yourself, I really want to lose weight, but you're kind of eating junk food a lot. And I've definitely been there, by the way, for this example. And you realize, hey, I'm the only one that can change this. If I change my diet, I'm probably going to lose some weight. Or if you're not happy with something, maybe in your marriage or in your relationship or the way that your kids are doing in school, something's got to change, whether it's that they get extra tutoring, whether it's that you spend more time with them on their homework. If you don't like how you're feeling. And if you feel like you have more negative words than positive words, then you've self-identified as burnout and compassion fatigue. You are the only one that can fix it. You're the only one that can fix it. So let's talk a little bit about how do we go about doing that? How do we go about doing that? Your stress level today. Again, on your piece of paper, and this can just be for you. You can write in the chat section if you want. Wherever your stress level is today, you are the only one that can make it go lower. You're the only one that can set up a way to make it go down, to make it go lower. So what I want you to be thinking is, what's your new normal going to be after today? And by the way, if you're on this program today and you feel like you need to do these exercises again, we are offering it again on Thursday and we're offering it again on Saturday. So you can join us again and we can keep reinforcing and you can ask more questions. So feel free to join us for a second time or share this information with somebody else. But what I want you to do right now is to be thinking, what do you want your life to be like? Do you want to stop feeling like you don't like your parent? Now, if you've never liked your parent and you're saying, well, that's impossible. How could I ever pull that off? There are things that you can do to feel less resentful or less angry or less displeased with your parent. For Robin, who is dealing with the narcissism with her mom, and mom is saying she wants to die. No, she doesn't. She wants to travel. Robin, for you at your stress level, you're the only one that can change it. So you've got to take a moment right now and think, what do you want your best life as a caregiver to be? What do you want it to look like? How do you want to feel? Do you want to feel less resentful? Do you want to feel less tired? Do you want to feel more that you have your life back? So think about that. What do you want it to look like? Self-care. Clearly, if you are burned out and if you're in compassion fatigue, you're probably not caring for yourself. And I don't mean, listen, I'm not suggesting that you need to go to a spa for a week. All right. I know most of you are saying, yeah, self-care, who has time for that? No, I'm talking about, going to a spa for a week would be great. And if you can pull that off, and if that's something that would renew you, great, go do it. But if you're somebody that's not sleeping 7 hours a night, if you're somebody who cannot remember the last time they watched a full movie, if you're somebody that loves to read and you can't remember the last time you picked up a book, that's a problem. You are not caring for yourself. If you're somebody that has put off their own doctor's appointments because all they do is go to their loved one's doctor's appointments, you are not engaged in self-care and you will remain burned out and you will remain in compassion fatigue. So I also want to mention that to expect delayed impact. If you are one of those people that says, and some of you might be saying, I haven't experienced a whole lot of problems due to the pandemic or caregiving, always know whatever's going on today, things might be going great today, but in the future, the pandemic and the difficult feelings people have dealt with as the result of the last couple of years, some people have kind of held them on and they're almost white knuckling it with the difficult feelings. If you've been doing that, if you've been holding all your difficult feelings in, they're going to come out in some way or another, whether you argue with somebody or whether you do it in a healthy way, whether you're exercising them out. But just know that if you've had difficult feelings, but you haven't talked them through with anybody, or you don't feel like there's been any conflict with others, know that you might not be able to white knuckle it forever. So what I want everybody to be thinking about is, because of the pandemic and or your caregiving, what are some healthy coping mechanisms or healthy habits that you've lost? Feel free to write in the chat section. What are some healthy habits or healthy coping mechanisms that you lost that you might want to get back? Let's think about that for a minute. Take a moment to write in. I'll just share for all of you. For me, one of the things I stopped doing during the pandemic is the whole gym thing. I have a treadmill in my house and I love to walk, and that's great. But I stopped going to lift weights because for a long time the gym was closed, and then also the gym was requiring masks. And I said, I don't want to bother with that. And so that was a healthy coping mechanism that I lost. So for some of you, it might be that you had friends and family being part of your caregiving crew, helping out with your loved one. And maybe you minimize that a little bit during the pandemic. Is there a way that you can bring that back? Boundaries. What about your boundaries? You are not supposed to be the answer for everything. And I'm going to target Robin on this. Robin's been so forthcoming with what she's gone through with her mom. Robin, you are, it sounds to me, mom lives with you. You don't have any support from your siblings. You're not supposed to be the answer for everything. You are not supposed to be the answer to everything. Okay? You're not. You got to establish your boundaries early and often. For example, when my grandmother was sick, she was very blessed because she had, gosh, I want to say like 12 of us helping out with care. Now, my two of my aunts were really in that primary caregiver position where they did most of the coordination, but my dad and my uncles and my cousins and my siblings and we participated also. But I'll tell you, my grandmother got to the point where she wanted somebody sleeping over her house every night because she was nervous that she was going to fall. And I remember my father calling me up one day, and we really all were taking turns sleeping at her place. And my father called me up and he said, one morning at like 7 o'clock in the morning, he calls me up. He's like, listen, I can't sleep over there anymore. And I said, Dad, you don't have to. You can set that boundary. You're allowed to set that. He's like, I'm not getting good night's sleep. Her place where I'm sleeping isn't comfortable. I'm like, you don't have to. He's like, I'm still willing to drive her to the doctor's appointments. I'm still willing to visit, but that's not something I want to do anymore. And I got to tell you, it really shifted stuff in our family because then everybody started to think, what are their boundaries? Some people said, I can't be late to work anymore. Some people said, I can't go over there in the middle of the night if she has an issue. Like, I can't be the one to do that. And ultimately, with all of our family members setting boundaries, what wound up occurring is that we had the conversation about moving with my grandmother, and she did not want to. Most people aren't saying, yes, I want to move to senior living. But for a lot of people, it is the absolute best thing that they could be doing. And I have seen countless examples of people who said, I don't want to move, or the family was resistant or reluctant. The only place for my loved one is at home. And that person flourishes. They seem healthier in senior living. They're making friends, they're socializing. And guess what? You get back your relationship. So when my dad set that first boundary and he said it to me, and I remember I was a secondary caregiver in that scenario, but I was the one that sort of set up the schedule, who's going to do what. And I said, you know what? Hank is out. My dad's name was Hank. Hank doesn't want to sleep over anymore. And it really was a very, very good moment because people started really evaluating how much longer can they do it. Now, for some people, when my grandmother-in-law, my husband's grandmom had cancer, everyone in the family pitched in, but we knew it was going to be time limited. And everybody pitched in for about 8 weeks before she passed away, and she was on hospice. When it's time limited, again, like the pandemic we talked about earlier, when we don't know how long something's going to last, it's really stressful. It's really scary. And no one wanted to lose Nana, but we all knew, okay, it's probably going to be a couple of months, maybe possibly 6 months, but it was 2 months really. And we were able to put our lives on hold. If you're putting your life on hold for a year, for 2 years, for Robin, for 6 years, you got to think about a question that who and what are you stealing time from? Who and what are you stealing time from? If your loved one went to senior living, would you be able to give time back to your grandkids? You'd be able to go to their soccer games. You'd be able to pick them up after school. You'd be able to, or to your maybe volunteer work, maybe to your faith community that you miss spending time with, maybe to sleep. You're stealing time from sleep because you're waking up in the middle of the night to go deal with your loved one who had a fall again. And then the other question I want you to ask yourself, is there another person or place that's a better fit for handling this? Especially for those of you who have your loved one living with you long term. Now, I want to give you another example. When my grandmother who I was super close with, she was in her 60s and I was in my 20s. She was a young grandmother. When my grandmother was in her 60s, she fell forward and she broke both shoulders. And wow, she was at a football game, standing in mud, fell forward, both shoulders are broken. And she had to have her shoulders immobilized for 4 weeks. So she couldn't use her hands, she couldn't use her arms, her elbows, her shoulders, nothing. Now, think about that. You can't do anything with either side of your upper body. And so my 3 aunts and I, so there were 4 of us, we committed. She didn't want my grandfather helping her in the bathroom or any of that. We committed that we'd be her arms, her hands, her shoulders for 4 weeks. So we split up a schedule. And I got to tell you, even though I knew it was only going to be 4 weeks, now my part of it was Friday nights through Sunday afternoon. That was my part. And I got to tell you that weekend it felt like the hours would never end. If you've ever read Dr. Peter Rabin's and Nancy Mace's book, The 36-Hour Day, I really related to that. And I was probably 22, 23 when this happened. And one of the things that really got us through it though, was that we knew it was time limited. It was only going to be 4 weeks. And we could commit X amount of hours for 4 weeks. We knew that there was an end date. Most of you are not dealing with an end date in sight, are you? You don't know. And I bet there's folks that are on this program that you feel guilty about that. When is my loved one? Maybe you're thinking, when will they pass away? It's been so long, we've been taking care of them. So some people do have that thought. I want you to know that it's normal and you're not a bad person if you had that thought. I know not everybody has had that thought, but a lot of times a community like a Covenant Living is the better place or person to handle what's going on with your loved one. You're not supposed to be able to do. Listen, now some families say, well, the only place for my mom, my husband, my grandmother is at home. Do you really have the skills to keep your loved one at home forever? And let's talk for a moment about Nancy Reagan. Nancy Reagan was probably the most famous family caregiver that ever was. She got the national conversation about Alzheimer's disease going because she took care of former President Reagan. And she was publicly constantly talking about how she would never, ever place Ronnie in a senior living community or a nursing home. He'll be at home. Well, guess what? She had a lot that we don't have. And I'm not talking about money. You might be on this program and say, I got plenty of money. But she actually had, I'm guessing, if President Reagan wandered out of that house in Bel Air, California, I'm guessing that the Secret Service were the ones that followed him and brought him back. It wasn't 1 or 2 people in the family chasing after him and not being able to sleep because President Reagan was wandering around the house. He had doctors in the home. He had nurses in the home. He had a staff in the home. And unless you have that sort of setup, long-term keeping somebody at home is going to be untenable. So I want you to be really thinking about who or what is the better place for handling this. And I also want you to ask yourself, who are you stealing time from? If you want, you can write in the chat section, but I want you to write on that piece of paper. I want you to answer those questions. Answer those questions for yourself. What is not working for you and your family anymore? Is not sleeping working for you all anymore? Is missing work or being late for work on a regular basis not working for you anymore? Is not spending time with your kids or your grandkids not working for you anymore? What's not working anymore? What do you want when you think about taking good care of your loved one, but also taking care of yourself? What does that look like? Now may be the time to course correct. I can promise you that if you are somebody who identify with being burned out or having compassion fatigue, especially if you said both, or you had more negative words than you had positive words, it is time to do something differently. It is time to course correct. When I go out on the boat with my husband and we go in one direction, and it's really windy and the weather changes on a dime, we course correct. We go into a different direction. And that is what we all need to do in caregiving. If it's working right now, that's great. But if it's not working next month or in 6 months, it's really important to course correct. So the boring advice nobody wants to hear about dealing with your burnout, dealing with your compassion fatigue is being mindful. I call this a boring advice nobody wants to hear in Cruising Through Caregiving. Be mindful about your diet, your exercise, your sleep. Most of us want to hear, oh, there's a vitamin. Just take this vitamin, you're going to be great. But no, it's really be part of self-care. It's not just going to a spa for a week. It's how you eating, how you exercising, how you sleeping. Are you socializing with other people? Are you doing something for pure pleasure, whether it's watching a TV show on Netflix, whether it's reading a book, whether it's going to play a round of golf? And all of us here today, reach out to your primary care doctor if you're struggling. And I'm going to tell you, the good doctors, the good physicians, if they know what's going on with your loved one, they're going to tell you you need to course correct. You need to look at other ways to do your care for your loved one that's not causing you burnout, compassion fatigue, distress. I've been a therapist. I actually do coaching now. I don't really do any therapy anymore, but I believe that everybody can benefit from counseling or therapy or a support group. And I know that the team at Covenant Living can share with you information about support groups if you're interested. But right now, getting psychotherapy, who might be able to help you work out feelings of guilt, feelings of, oh my gosh, could I really move my mom into senior living? All of that, working that out. There's a lot of stories that we tell ourselves about if we don't keep our parents at home. And talking to a good therapist, a psychologist, a clinical social worker, a licensed professional counselor can really help you to deal with some of those difficult feelings. And you can ask your doctor about a referral. And right now, more than ever before, I think, even though, listen, I've never done therapy as a therapist on telehealth. And I don't think it should be the only method, right? Because I do think there's a lot that a good therapist can see when they're in person with you. But it's never been easier to get counseling because telehealth is such a viable option now. Misia, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I know you're one of the team at Covenant Living. Covenant Living hosts in-person caregiving support group meetings. So if you want to write into the chat section or on the evaluation, Petra, if you would put the evaluation link into the chat section, if you're interested in getting information about support groups, we will pass that on to Covenant and they will share depending on where you are located geographically, or maybe even just doing a virtual. There's tons of virtual support groups out there. But talk to your doctor. Don't keep these negative feelings a secret. So, okay, Robin, I did ask Robin, you wish you had your pre-caregiver life back. I keep thinking it'll be over any day. My mom convinced me she'll be gone if I leave her. Mom came with us, no vacation for me. Robin, you are the only one that can change that situation. You're the only one that has the power to do it. And I know it's hard, but I think you got to pick your hard. You got to pick, what hard do you want? Do you want the hard part of saying, Mom, this is my boundary. I can't, it's been 6 years. We need to figure out a new solution. Maybe Covenant Living is the solution. Or do you want to have the hard that's you're miserable all the time and you feel like crap all the time? Robin says, I keep thinking it'll be over soon. But Robin, if you're just sitting there waiting for your mom to pass away, I'm guessing that doesn't feel good. I'm guessing that doesn't feel good. And you feel like you're everyone's caregiver. You got to course correct. You got to think of doing something differently. So maybe today isn't the day you're ready to place your mom at a Covenant. Okay, that's fine, Robin. But maybe today's the day you call your doctor and say, can I have a therapist referral? Or maybe today's the day that you join a support group. Maybe today's the day that you set a boundary and you say, I'm going to go on a vacation without my mother and she's going to have to stay with somebody else. But think about, who is a better fit for dealing with some of this than me? Dr. David Burns is one of my favorite authors. He is a psychiatrist, and he wrote 2 books of When Panic Attacks, and also a great book called Feeling Good about depression. And in the book Feeling Good, Dr. Burns talks about the concept of action begets motivation, begets more action. Now, what does that mean? And he's talking about depression, but in Dr. Burns' book, Feeling Good, he says when somebody's depressed, they don't feel like, we're always saying, oh, get out of bed, it'll make you feel better, or go exercise, it'll make you feel better, or go read a book, or go join a club. And people who are depressed do not feel like doing that. They're not motivated. But Dr. Burns says you have to make yourself just do it, take action. And so that's what I want to encourage you all to do. Dr. Burns I'm applying Dr. Burns' theory to being burned out and having compassion fatigue, okay? So do something small today. Do a virtual visit with one of the Covenant Living communities, or call, just find out the information. You don't have to place your mother today. Just find out what's it all about. They're going to talk to you. They're there to help you solve your problems. And if you're not the right perfect fit for them, it's not the right place for you, they're going to make a referral. They're going to say, hey, here's some other things that you might be thinking about. Or maybe calling your doctor, or maybe asking somebody in your family to stay with your mom once a week so you can take a walk. But do one small thing, take one small action, and it's going to make you motivated to do more. And you're going to take more action to reduce your compassion fatigue, to reduce your burnout. You're the only one that can decide what your stress level is going to be tomorrow and going forward. So do you want it to be 30, 20, 10? You're the only one that can make that happen. Think about it. Write down on your piece of paper, what number do you want tomorrow to look like? What small steps are you going to take to get there? So I want to say thank you so much. Petra, I'm going to ask you to put this link into the chat section of all the Covenant locations, but also the evaluation as well. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just talk to you for a moment. Is there any, there's also the other thought that Mazia is saying that many Covenant locations offer short-term respite. So that is something you might want to think about. You might want to try that. So feel free to write in any last comments, any questions for myself, or if you have something for the team at Covenant that I can pass along to them, and they will definitely reach out to you. This is all about trying to help you reduce your stress and your burnout. So I want to encourage everybody to write into the evaluation. Just click on it, and then there's a link for the Covenant Living locations. And if you have any last comments, any last questions at all, feel free to write into the chat section. And otherwise, I want to say thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much. I'm going to put up that slide one more time so you have the link, and you can see covliving.org/locations. So if you have want additional information, but any questions at all, write them in the evaluation. We will get that to the team at Covenant. If you enjoyed today, if you want to participate again, you can come back. We're doing it Thursday of this week at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time. And we're doing it again on Saturday at noon Eastern time and 9 a.m. Pacific time. So I'm going to turn it over to Petra to wrap us up. And I want to say thank you and have a wonderful day. Remember, you are the only one. You're the only one that can course correct and reduce your stress and compassion fatigue. Get that number down. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And thank you again to Covenant Living for sponsoring today's program for you. I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I did. Thank you again for attending today's program. And as Jennifer has said, we have another program on Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, and another program on Saturday at noon with the same content. So if you want to recommend it to anyone else, or you want to do this again, we'd be happy to see you again. Please take a look at the link I am posting right now. This contains an evaluation. It would be great if you could fill it out. I hope you enjoy the rest of the week, and all the best to you. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.